Making your first game is a big deal and can be really intimidating. But what if there was a guide so that game came to life easier? This week, join me, Zach Walsh, as I talk with Brian about his game called Our Farm Becomes the Battlefield. We talk themes, SRDs, and the joys of game jams. Welcome to Scheduled for Launch, a podcast to discover projects you may have missed. This week, I am very excited to be bringing on another person who is just pumping out a really, really cool and fun-looking game. Brian, thank you so much for coming on to the show this week.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So, something I'm excited about with this too is we are actually talking about it a little bit right before the show started, and this is based on a very simple system, but not one that I'm familiar with. So I'm hoping to pick your brain on that just a little bit as we get further into it.
Yeah, you bet.
Oh, perfect. But before we do, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So there's not a lot to say about me. I'm Brian. I also go by Voen or Oakenborough online. I like tabletop role playing games. I like playing them. And more recently, I like making them. There's just a wide world of cool stuff out there that I'm excited to be a part of.
You know what? It's also been just like a really good time for game creation too. You see it more and more. There's a lot more games coming out, which is a little bit of
hmm
a problem because there's so little time to play everything too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, what is Our Farm Became Battlefields?
Uh, our farm becomes the battlefield. So this is the
Becomes
game
the battlefield.
that
I'm so
I know
sorry.
it's a bit of a mouthful of a title. This is a game that I've been working on for a little while, that I released last month, and it's a Lumen game. The tagline is low tech, anti-capitalist, power fantasy, and in it you play farmers in sort of a pre-industrial fantasy world who have been displaced by a capitalist wizard, who has created this new invention, these farming golems, and use that to buy up all of the farmland and basically control the industry, which put everybody sort of in a really bad spot. And these farmers say, "Hey, that's terrible. We don't like this." They band together and they say, "Okay, so we live in this pre-industrial fantasy society with a prevailing capitalist mindset, much like our modern society. Um, so what if we like worked together though and didn't fight each other? What would that look like?" And so they form a cooperative, which is just this terrifying and like radical prospect for them. And
Mhm.
they teach themselves magic, and then they start stealing this wizard's stuff. They steal these farm golems, and they say, "Hey, we can learn to remotely pilot these things, and then we can give them hammers, and we can use our magic to make them better and turn them into weapons. And we're just going to go take back our own farms. We're going to break this wizard's stuff and steal it."
Yeah, and it's just it's such a cool. I like one of my favorite things in the rule book is actually you wrote out a little kind of like a story for the pre-written world more or less of this version,
hmm
and it's it kind of shows you that a very simplified version of a like a capitalist route and how this wizard really quite quickly took over. So
Right,
like
right.
I loved it. I thought it was so genius, and I think especially right now with current world state, a lot of people can kind of see how that would fit. But before we get really heavy into this game, can you tell everybody a little bit about the Lumen SRD because I know very very little about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lumen, well, first I want to talk a little bit about what an SRD is, because not everybody might be familiar with that.
That's a
It
good
stands for
idea. Yeah.
system, it stands for System Reference Document, which is used outside of like role-playing games and stuff. But in the language of like tabletop role-playing games, it's a description of a kind of a game. It contains all of the like mechanical levers that exist, and it's a description that's really written to a game designer from another game designer and says, "Here's how you would design a game using these mechanics." Um, so it isn't a game, but it is a description of a type of game. So Some of the like really popular SRDs that I'm aware of, and there's a ton, would be like the 24XX by Jason Tochi, whose name I am probably mispronouncing because I've only seen it written, and I apologize. Um, but that underlines like the 2400 series of games. And then there's the Carta SRD by Kat McDonald and Peach Garden Games, or there's the Wretched and Alone SRD by Matt Sanders and Chris Bissetti. And again, I'm sorry for any name mispronunciations in there, but these are all like rule books that describe how to build a game. Another way to think about it would be like if you took the D20 system out of Dungeons and Dragons and you were like just wrote up, here's how you have some stats and you roll a 20-sided die and you look to get over a target number, and that's how rolls work. You
Okay.
could build an SRD for that, or Powered by the Apocalypse. There isn't, as far as I know, an official SRD for that, but you could make one that says, it's got these systems in it, and moves work like this. They have these triggers, and
Hmm.
all Powered by the Apocalypse games work like this, or most work like this. And here are some cool levers you can play with. So that's what an SRD is, and the Lumen SRD is what underlies this game. And I actually built it in response to the Lumen Game Jam, which came out. And
Oh,
so Spencer Campbell of Gila RPGs put out some games first, because usually when you make an SRD, you make games first, and then you're like, hey, this is a
yeah.
cool system that underlies these really cool games. I could make that a thing. So like Light was a really cool game that inspired this, but Lumen, first, to describe like what it is, it's all about making stories focused on powerful characters. So like all Lumen characters have this array of powers. They're very
Okay.
combat focused. Like the rules are extremely combat focused, and they tie into like a core gameplay loop, which is definitely part of it. Like you go on an adventure, you come back, you have some downtime, you do that again, and you go through the loop. And so all that's like sort of the core of the Lumen game. And as I understand it, it came out of like the looter shooter genre of video games. So like Destiny
Ah, okay.
and Warframe and some other games, which I'm gonna I don't actually know anything about them. That's not like a genre of video games that I play. So actually, when I first picked up I saw the Lumen Game Jam and I read the SRD, and I was like, well, this seems pretty cool, but I don't think it's for me. Like that's combat heavy games. Oh, I don't know about that. If I would be interested in that, which is I was like, I don't know. But then it stuck in my head because it's just a fantastically written SRD. And I thought, well, it's about being powerful. It's about this power fantasy. Like, what could I make there? And that's sort of where the game came from, because the more that I thought about it, the more I was like, oh yeah, that fits. Oh yeah, that fits. And it's just such a clean and tight system that does exactly what it promises, which is these powerful characters with simple decisions and like really quick gameplay loops.
Okay, that's really cool. Like the Lumen system is, and I think we're going to see a lot more of them starting to come up because this is,
Yeah.
like you said, it's based after the looter shooter, and those things are really popular right now. And one thing that is really noticeable, even in your game, is that getting into actually playing the game is so quick. Like character
Hmm.
creation takes so little time. I was able to make like two characters before we started this.
Yeah, it's really fast.
Yeah, so let's get into the game a little bit.
Hmm.
And at the heart of this game too is this really cool loop for our farm. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how that works because you're in and out quickly and it looks like it's going to be like a lot of fun to get in through this. So could you explain each part of the loop a little bit for us?
Yeah, you bet. So the mission loop, as it's called in our farm, is super structured, and it has three phases. There's the mission setup phase, the mission playthrough phase, and then the mission aftermath phase. The setup is, the first part, and the
Hmm.
goal of the setup phase, which is the least structured part of play, is to figure out what the mission's going to be, right? So in a
Okay.
traditional game, you might have the GM say, this mysterious figure in a tavern tells you some stuff, like so you know what's going on, or
Okay.
there's a lot of ways to do that. I actually really have been approaching this from the direction of I think collaboration is really cool, and it ties in very
Hmm.
well to the themes of the game, which is all about cooperation and forming this cooperative. So what I recommend is that actually the group sits down and says, what should our mission be? And you look at some of there's some stuff to help you in there about figuring out what it is, but you're going to establish what the setting and like the goals of the mission and what are the stakes. Um, and then you can role play through it like as you want to. Some groups will want to say, oh, like someone's sending us on this mission, or this town is in trouble, or whatever. Let's just set up a scene and go through that. Or you can skip that if you'd rather, and you just say, look, we got to go take out this warehouse. We're gonna go destroy Tysanto, who is the name of the evil wizard. We're gonna go destroy this warehouse and steal something important for our collective, and that's what we're gonna do. So that's the setup phase. Once you know that, the playthrough becomes pretty straightforward because you just start doing that. So
Hmm.
playthrough is broken down into two types of scenes. There's action scenes and montage scenes. Most of the time you're going to be doing these action scenes. So it's really just like jumping from fight to fight to fight. And these montage scenes are going to tie that together so that you've got a little bit of ebb and flow in the flow of the game and the flow of the story. And then you do the aftermath phase, which is a bookkeeping phase. You're going to roll some dice. There's some rules to go through where you say, oh, how did the mission go? What did we get? How did the cooperative change? And you're all set up to say, what changed? I'm ready to go through the loop again. What's the next thing we're going to need? And you could do this in one session, or you could actually do more than one mission in a session if your sessions are a little bit longer, or if your missions are short, because there's no set time to how long a mission would take.
Okay, so you go through the loop over and over, and you keep on building yourselves, and you're basically trying to stop the evil wizard, and you are getting upgrades along the way, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah. So one of the things where this differs from the base Lumen experience. So Lumen has a lot of rules for like loot. So a lot of the Lumen games will have loot. You defeat an enemy, you get some loot. You can use that to upgrade and things like that. I really wanted to tie back into the themes more. So what you really upgrade during the mission aftermath, you upgrade the cooperative. And so
Yeah.
when you build your cooperative, it actually has its own stats and its own counters, and you go through some roles to figure out how that changed based on how your mission went. And then, as a byproduct of that, you might be able to upgrade the individual golems that you're fighting with.
Yeah, and there are a couple different ones to choose from, and they all are very, very unique, those golems. And you can definitely see how you put a lot of thought into how each one would work, both before they were reclaimed and after they were taken back by the farmers. Um,
Yeah,
I I'm a huge fan of the um, the the planter one, the small cat sized one. I love the idea behind it. It's so cool.
it's fun. Yeah. So there are three classes. There's the three golems, um, and so there's the digger and the planter and the cutter. And I imagine them as being, what they were designed for and invented by Tysanto. They were invented to do farm work, but these farmers they're scrappy, and they're retrofitting them to do what they need. So the planter, I imagined it as this like very versatile thing that could get down real low to the dirt, be planting seeds, maybe do some harvesting, do some weeding, like
Hmm.
really get into that. And how would you use that if you were like, okay, but no, I want to fight things with this? What would you do? And so like I gave it, and I said, here's a weapon for it. It's got an energy sickle that you might take a regular sickle and like with these magics that these farmers have uncovered, they can imbue it with this extra energy, and so now you've got sort of a sickle shaped lightsaber or something. And it's like got these nimble little fingers, so it could climb on another golem and really like tear it apart, start disrupting things, or it's got the ability to repair, and it also has just like this fire ability that they equipped it with. So it's this basic basic piece of equipment that then you can stack on things. And there's a bunch of each of those have like upgrades that you can unlock that are already built on there. But I also have a bunch of rules in here of I would encourage anyone who's playing this to come up with your own stuff, right? And that's what these farmers are doing is they're scrappy, and they're building new things, and they're figuring out how to take back their world, and you're empowered to do that too. So maybe you're out fighting an enemy, and that enemy has some sort of cloaking device, and you're like, oh, I bet we could steal that and like figure out how it works and put it on this planter, and now we can cloak this planter. That would be awesome. Yeah, go do that. That'd be cool.
I just love how it's set up. It just, like I said, nice and tight, and it runs really really smoothly. But you can see how it's designed really tightly, and everything works like a nice little package. You can get into this game really quickly, and there is just a lot to work with. And reading through the rules, you can tell that you built this game to be, like you said, a collective, right down to when you're first starting to design it. You, as a group, you design how the collective works. What made that, and it, like how'd you decide that that was going to be part of it? Like, because you said it, the collective upgrades almost separately as if it's its own character. So could you talk a little bit about what went into that theme of upgrading the collective?
Yeah, that's actually been something that's been percolating in the back of my brain for a while. So I have this pie in the sky game that I'd like to design, but that I think I know realistically is currently beyond my skill set. That's okay. It just percolates back there, and it gives me tons of ideas, and then I harvest those and I use them in other things. And so one of them is sort of like, what if I've been really like in my personal life enamored of like permaculture and forming more close relationships. Especially, I think the pandemic has really influenced that. That lack
Yeah,
of, suddenly you're like, oh yeah, you can't see other people. And I'm like, oh, it turns out that I actually really like other people. Who would have
yeah,
thought? And that personal connection is something I value and need. Um, but yeah, so that's definitely been there. And I was thinking about, there's this game where, what if you're making the game together, and it's like something that's designed for the open table, where you don't always have the same players. Different people come, and different people, like, we don't have a GM, it just runs itself. And it's about a group, and you have these themes at the table because the table is itself a kind of collective, right? It's a
yeah,
group of people that are bound to a common purpose. They make their own rules, they make their own procedures, they decide when they're going to meet and how long and all of that stuff. And at the same time, they're also building one. And I love when game mechanics mirror what's actually happening, right? So you could it's a way to reinforce those themes. So that's been sort of percolating in the back of my head, and I've been thinking about, like, how would you do that? And one of the ways that you would do it is you have to make the group more important than the individuals. A lot
yeah.
of tabletop role playing games are very centered on, what is my character like and how do I role play that character, which is super important and really fun. And I'm absolutely throwing shade at no one, because there are lots of different ways to play games, and I love those games. I'm talking about something else that I was thinking about.
Yeah,
It's like, what if you didn't have that? What if you said, no, the group is more important than the individual? How would you mechanically reinforce that? And one of the ways is like, well, the group needs a character sheet then. And certainly the belonging outside belonging games, no dice, no masters, whichever way you want to phrase that, Dream Askew and Dream Apart, they do this fantastically, and then all the
yeah,
games that are based on those. So that's a huge source of inspiration for where that comes from. I also saw Jeremy Strandberg's Stone Top game that recently kickstarted,
yes.
but has
That
been
looked
in
great.
progress for a long time. Does the same thing, and they do it brilliantly. So this is a mini
Hmm.
reflection of some of that. And I said, well, you should decide, what does it work. And then, so I posed these questions that you answer as a group, and I think they're kind of hard questions, but they sort of get to the heart of what is the cooperative about. So one of them is
Yeah,
like, how does the cooperative distribute the food it produces? And there's some options here, like maybe they sell it, maybe they just share it freely because they're very altruistic, or maybe they share it within
yeah,
the co-op because they're very like group oriented, or they could do whatever they want. Or there's another question that's like, what is the cooperative's vision for the world? Like, are you aiming for a socialist state? Is that something that you, as cooperative members, want? Or are you like, no, we aim for cooperative farming, we haven't thought about anything else? Like, what are you directed at? And I think these are interesting questions that sort of guide the group and start getting you thinking. That's the first thing you would do if you were playing this game, is that, not what are my character, but what is the group that we are a part of?
yeah.
Yeah. And so then we kind of boil that down to just three simple stats. There's the membership stat, which is like how many people more or less have joined, the surplus stat, which is how much extra time and equipment and food are you producing, and the mindset stat, which is like how united are you on this vision that the cooperative has come up with. Not just the few people who are playing, but the cooperative that they represent, that they are acting as agents of. How
Oh,
united is that all together? And like that's a really, really crude simplification of a very
yeah.
complicated group, but it lets you sort of those stats can change, and during the mission aftermath, you make rolls based on those stats, and then you change those stats, and then those can impact how your golems can get upgraded. So they let you form a story that is inspired by these things. If your mindset is dipping, you have to explain like, oh wait, why aren't we all united on this vision? What's happening? Like, are there new groups like factioning off? Is there some politics? Is there like what's going on? And how do we fix it? Our next mission should probably be about like uniting ourselves on this vision. Maybe we need to go to some place that's being neglected by the cooperative and help them and remind ourselves that like, yeah, we're in this together and we're working together. Maybe that's what you need to do, and use it to sort of fuel the stories rather than reflect what's already happened.
That's so good, and it lends itself to the themes that you placed into this game so well. You talked about it a little bit in the beginning that there's four major themes in this game. That would be farming, cooperation, power fantasy, and anti-capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
I think people right now, more than ever, really are starting to farming and power fantasy a little bit, but cooperation, anti-capitalism. We're starting to hit more of those times, especially with the pandemic. They're becoming more relevant, more talked about, and a lot of people are feeling that in the current world state. What were some of the more difficult parts of the theme to convey, though?
So the most difficult part, I think, of the theme to convey was the farming, actually, because
Really?
well, so the power fantasy is like free because that's what Lumen does, and it does an
Yeah.
amazing job. So it was like I pick up this SRD, I use the way that it says. It's got these stats, and you roll the dice pool, and you pick the best one. You
Hmm.
get successes or successes with consequences or all of that. So that was like
Yeah.
awesome, cool, we can do that. And the anti-capitalism is just baked into it. I
Yeah.
really wanted a game that was that didn't have killing and that didn't have death, where everything was property damage. And that ties into the theme of like, well, if everything is property damage and all of the powers that the bad guy has are like, I have tons of money, that's my power.
Oh.
Um, like that ended up actually just sort of falling into place once I said that, and I was like, what's his superpower? And it's like, the three things that he has is he's a good inventor, um, he has a lot of money, and then he lives in a world where people say, "Hey, if you have a lot of money, you must deserve to have a lot of money. Whatever you do with that money, that's fair because it's your money." So there's some stuff in here that it suggests how to cause problems. He wouldn't cause problems if he's like, "Oh no, these two towns are cooperating too much and they're cutting me out, and I can't work my way in to like buy up all of the
Hmm.
farms there." He wouldn't like send golems and threaten the townspeople. He wouldn't do any of that. That would be illegal. That would cause him
Yeah.
too much backlash. No, he would just buy the bridge connecting the towns and erect a high toll, like boom, stop trade,
Hmm.
done. And everybody in this world would say, it's his bridge. Like, of course he needs to hire a toll. Bridges aren't free. He's investing in our community. He deserves whatever money he can make off of that. And if people don't want to pay it, well, they don't have to use his bridge. Someone else can build a bridge. And that's sort of the mindset that he has. And as soon as I started rolling down that, it just like falls out. It's really that theme was pretty straightforward, the anti-capitalist theme. So it was really the and cooperation, I think, was a little bit challenging. I changed some of the lumen stuff, which doesn't not do cooperation, but it doesn't focus on it as much as I wanted to for this particular game. So like one of the things I got rid of was individual hit points. There are no hit
Okay.
points. There's no consequences. The golems are just property, and they're not even very um, very like hard to come by. So if you
Ah,
destroy
okay.
them, like that's not meaningful story wise unless it causes the mission failure. So I say, oh, okay, well let's just track that then. Let's not track how close are these to being destroyed. Let's track how close are we to losing this mission thread. Um, and then putting in the collective stats and tying in every move has an upgrade that lets you use it not on your turn as long as you're helping someone else. Like that was pretty
Okay.
easy to tie in. It's really the farming that was hard, because I think farming is cool. I think farmers are cool. I think
Yeah.
I think the fact that we just make food by putting these magic machines in the ground that take sunlight and water and then turn it into food, and they're just plants, and we didn't do anything.
Hmm.
They just arrived. It's like magic. It's so cool. Um, and like farmers, they in our world they get a raw deal.
Yeah.
It's often a disrespected profession, um, and it's it is there's a good reason that the wizard is named Tysanto. Um, it is this is not like a story that I made up and invented whole cloth. This is me reading a couple of books and being like, wow, if I just simplified this down to something in a fantasy world, it just directly translates. Um, so that's all
Yeah.
that's all present, and I really just wanted to kind of highlight that and make sure that the golem still reflected what what I think farming in this world might be like, and I wanted to make sure that that surplus, which largely represents the stuff that you're producing, is present on the cooperative, um, and make sure that that was a present theme for this.
You know what? That I have a lot of respect for that because you don't. You're right. It is a raw deal for farmers, and it's not like most of us are doing much to help them. I know personally, me and my partner, we've been trying to buy local more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's tricky because a big part of this is capitalism, and I don't know about you. I really like strawberries, but fresh strawberries can be pricey sometimes and hard to get,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially in my area. So they're now a treat because yeah, basically.
It is so hard, and I try to do the same thing, and I actually put that on itch. I have two sets of community copies up there. So there's the community copy that anyone's free to take if you're like, this game represents a financial burden to me. I can't afford it right now, but I want it. Like,
Okay.
good, have one.
Yeah.
That's a limited pool that's like easily refreshed, but anyone, if you say like I should have one, like have one. That's great. I think that's
Yeah.
awesome. There's another pool that is unlimited, which is if you're supporting local farmers in whatever way you think, then also this game is free to you. Like, please go take one because that's sort of the point of the game. And but at the same time, I recognize that that's like an extremely privileged position that we have to even
Yeah.
be able to make that choice, right? Like
Hmm.
to be able to say, oh yeah, there is a CSA near me, like one actually exists, and the farmer is like a local person who I can talk to and I want to support, like, oh, that's cool. And I can afford to do it because it's not cheaper. Like that, I talk about this in the game. Um, Tysanto didn't take over the industry by doing anything shady, uh, with quotes around that. He did
Yeah.
it by making an invention that made it cheaper to produce good food and then
Yep.
producing good food and then using that to control the market. Like that's a success story as far as capitalism goes. Like that's
Hmm.
awesome. And the world should be a better place because we now have a technology that we didn't before. And the same thing is true in our world. It's more expensive to not to not do what the to not let the megacorp produce your food,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. And so like I recognize that that's a extremely privileged position to be able to even say like I'm making that choice.
Hmm.
But it's a good one. If people who can make that choice do, that helps.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I was most surprised too about the setup for this game is how by the book it was because like you can imagine not just farming but like anything
Hmm.
that really is that needs equipment. This could take place in that way.
Oh,
So I
absolutely.
was it's so well thought out. One thing you told me right before we started is actually that our farm started off from a game jam. Can you tell me about your experience with
Yeah,
the Lumen Game Jam?
absolutely. So game jams are awesome, by the way. Anybody who is interested in designing things and hasn't participated in a game jam, I highly recommend it. You get like a theme or an SRD or whatever, and then you have 30 days or 60 days or however long, usually much shorter than you'd like, time to build a game out of it. And then that's all cool. It builds like some cool creative energy. It really, like NaNoWriMo or something, it kicks you in the seat of the pants to get things done, which is awesome. I definitely need that sometimes.
Yeah.
But then you have at the end you have a really like this built-in community because you say, "Oh, I spent all this time doing this thing, and I think it's really cool." And then you look around, and you're like, "Wow, look at the things you did! Like you started from the same point that I did. We had the same prompt, but you took it in such a different direction. That's so neat." And then they also are looking at your stuff, and they're like, "Whoa, you took it in a different direction. That's so cool." And it's actually a really cool way to build a community. So the Lumen Game Jam is one of those that's built on the Lumen SRD. That was the purpose of the jam, was use this SRD,
Okay.
make a game. But there's also something that I haven't seen before, which is an initiative that went along with the Lumen Game Jam and is still going right now, called the Lux Collective. And it said, "Hey, you should itch fund your game. You should build something with the Lumen SRD, and then you should itch fund it." For those who aren't familiar with itch funding, it's like an alternative to Kickstarter, or it's a proposed alternative to Kickstarter, where you just say, "Hey, my game is out. It's complete. It's ready to play, or it's in whatever state it is.
Yeah.
If you buy it now, you're funding further development. Maybe you're funding art or editing, or maybe you're just can you know, it's just showing me that like, hey, I should invest more time in this because
Hmm.
people like it and they're interested in it. And I put out this other game, nobody wants that one. So like I built it to my satisfaction because I don't build games just because I'm like, hey, other people will like this. I build games that I like. And
Yeah.
everybody does different things. But it's a good way to say, not only did I like this, but other people thought it was awesome. Cool. Like maybe I should make some more stuff for this. That's awesome. Um, and the Lux Collective is like a group of people all doing that together
Hmm.
and sort of forming this group that is trying to make itch funding more viable. Right now, Kickstarter is like a huge platform, which is
Yes.
great,
Yes, it
and
is.
it's been transformative for the indie role playing game scene and many other things. Like Kickstarter is amazing. Itch is in some ways better for the creators.
Yes, it is. It
as a
definitely is.
platform, but it does not have the same eyes on it. So
No.
you basically you get a lot more money doing a Kickstarter than you do doing an itch fund. And this
Yeah.
is sort of a cool grassroots effort to be like, if we made a whole bunch of itch funding games and then supported them with the power of just each other, hey, maybe that would be helpful and would start making a dent in this. And I think it is. We're seeing a lot of those itch funding games being more successful and uh, raising the funds, and it's cool to be a part of and to see the art come to life and be like, oh, that game was really cool. And then they get enough money to hire an artist, and the artist makes some stuff. You're like, okay, no, now that game is cool because it was really cool before, but that is amazing. Um, so yeah, that's sort of came out. It's not a part of the jam. It's related to the jam. I
Yeah.
wasn't there for the whole genesis of that. I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Oh boy. I think it's just like it's great because you have this game that's a lot about being a collective and a cooperative and working towards a single goal, and it reflects so much further than that. You're seeing other people, like you said, you started with the same prompt and they're doing other things. You're doing something really cool with this. I love this game. You sent me one of the copies and I read through it and I was like, this is something else. And I really want
Thank
to see
you.
this game succeed. Oh no, I love it. And no, you don't even need to thank me for that one. So we're actually starting to run close to out of time here. So I got a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
So here's one that's starting to kind of, depending where you are, peter out a little bit. How did COVID-19 affect the development of our farms?
Not very much, other than being like I touched on a little bit earlier, a source of inspiration. So COVID was really like that. Well, one thing it did was it drove me into online, like looking online for groups. But I wasn't really big into online tabletop gaming before COVID.
Yeah.
But then I was like, well, I want to do some, and I that's my only option. So I guess I'll try it out.
Mhm.
And that drove me to the RPG Talk Discord server, which is a fantastic Discord server. If you like big Discord
Ah,
servers,
okay.
everyone there is super cool. And they have a design contest. And I was like, I'm here to find a group. But what's all this then? And started doing the design contest with that and having just a ton of fun meeting cool people and saying, hey, what about this? And learning a bunch of about layout and a bunch about design. And I'm still learning like all the time. It's a really great place. So in that way, it's directly responsible for this game. And then, of course, the themes like wanting that community and feeling the lack of it, and then that being just forefront in my mind uh, is a big one.
You know what? That makes sense. And like I said, COVID-19, depending where you are in the world, it's taking different tolls now. I know that in the United States it's a little bit less. Where I am, it's still like I'm in Ontario, so it's like it's still going on a little bit. Not that the the illness hasn't left, but there are still a bunch of restrictions in place, and
Hmm.
uh, other countries are still where they were 1 year ago. So
It's tough, and it's
yeah,
definitely something that to tie back into the themes, we all have to do our part.
yeah,
If we all have to work together, we're not all in. I know there's been a bunch of pushback against the phrase "we're all in the same boat," and I strongly agree with that pushback. But we are all on the same team, I guess, and we
yes.
should all be working together.
So, on a lighter note, because this is my favorite question to ask, what advice can you give someone trying to make their own game and they have no experience?
Uh, so I would definitely say join game jams, or even the RPG Talk Discord server has these design competitions, which are even like smaller than game jams. But it's great because you have a deadline, and so you have to produce something, and you have a community who's very interested in you producing something and seeing
Mhm.
what other people do, and so you've got this like you already have this immediate kind of support group and the group of people to talk to say, hey, what if I did this? Would that be cool? And they might say, yeah. They might say, oh yeah, but also this, or they might say, oh, I'm working on that. Can we work together? Um, all of that can happen, especially, and it's really easy when you do the game jams. If you're looking for those, there's physicalgamejams.card carrd.co, which is maintained
Okay.
by MV the May Visit on Twitter. They also are doing like stuff for the Lux Collective, and they did the layout for the Lumen SRD. So they're a super awesome person who deserves like some notice. But they just run this thing that organizes and lets you see all of the physical game jams that are going on itch right now, which is usually the place where you see them. Um, and that's awesome. So you
That's
participate in
so
that
cool.
by designing a game, you make something. Also recognize that if you've never designed something before, your first thing is not going to be a masterpiece, and that's great. Like
Yeah, you got to do it. You just
you got
got
to
to
do
start
it, and you got to
somewhere.
keep learning. Yeah, I had an art teacher who told me everyone has like 1,000 bad drawings in them, and the faster you can get those 1,000 bad drawings onto the page, the sooner you can get to that 1,001st drawing that's pretty good. Um, and I think that's a really solid advice of just like, not that your game is going to be terrible, but you're going to learn a lot by doing, and having that deadline and that community of people who will look at it and give you feedback. And then all of the stuff that you can see, because you should go read their games and play their games and
Mhm.
see, oh, look at what this person did. I was having this problem. I didn't even notice that it was a problem, but the way that they did this, it totally sidestepped it. That was amazing. Um, you build a cool community, and you build some really great friends, and you have a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. And one thing I love about that question too, just with everybody, is in one way or another they say something really similar, and it kind of all ties back to my very first interview on this podcast when it was an okay podcast. I've upgraded my stuff so far. I kind of figured out what I'm doing, but it was with a friend, and he said, strike while the iron's hot. And then after we finished, he said, the great thing about that is the iron is always hot so long as you're ready to go. So
Oh,
just,
nice.
yeah, just get out there and do it. Like, it's so I want to talk to more of you out there and see what happens. Like it's so much. Um,
Yeah.
but final question, Brian, where can people find more about you and more about Our Farm Becomes the Battlefield?
Yeah. So the you can probably find me on Twitter. I am at Oakenboro, Oakenboro, on Twitter, and that's probably the best place to connect with me. It's got links to my itch store. It's got links to my blog. It's got all of that stuff. Or if you're on RPG Talk, you can find me there.
Thank you so much for coming on here, Brian. It's been an absolute blast having you here. Like I said, I love this game. I'm really hoping to look more into the Lumen system because I knew very little about it before you approached me with this, and I think it is so cool. And I knew nothing about SRD, so I've learned a lot just from this one interview. So I want to thank you personally for that.
Well, thank you so much. This has been awesome. I could talk all day about it. But yeah, go check out the Lumen SRD. It's so cool, and it's one of the best written ones too, in terms of telling you exactly how to make a game. So that's a good way to get started too.
Phenomenal. All right, and as always, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Brian, thank you once again for
Thank
just
you.
joining me on this. Brian and Our Farm Becomes the Battlefield, they've already sort of launched. So go check it out and go help with this itch fund because the I want to see more great art for this. I do. The bit that's there, I'm so excited to see more people play this game. Once again, thank you so much and have a great night, everybody. Bye. Thank you so much to Brian for coming onto the show this week. I enjoyed learning about the Lumen system so much that I actually went out and picked up the SRD for myself. Brian, you may hear from me in the future if I have some questions. But please, audience, go check out Our Farm Becomes the Battlefield. It's a lightning-fast game that is hugely affordable. It's masterfully put together. You don't even realize it's Brian's first game. And that brings me to you. As always, thank you so much for listening. Thanks to everything that you guys have done. We've actually built up a little bit of sway, and we've helped out a couple indie designers get their games funded. So there's a couple things out there that exist because you helped me build this platform. So if you want to continue keeping this growing, please share the show with a friend. Let them know what you think. I'm always here to listen to you guys, and let me know what you want to hear about. Next week, there's actually not going to be an episode coming out. There's no scheduling issues. Nothing's wrong with the show. I just need to get a couple work things together. So I promise you I'll be back 2 weeks from this episode. Thank you for your patience. I look forward to seeing you there. Talk to you soon. Take care.